Sometimes in the Friday episode of the podcast, well, of course, I do the roundup with Debbie, and that's coming up. But I also like to take on topics that are a little more weekendy, by which I mean topics that are broad, maybe a little more theoretical, topics that are not necessarily plucked right from today's news. And I want to talk about American Maoism. Now, Maoism, of course, a reference to Mao Zedong, the longtime dictator of China who dragged China into a police state, ultimately died, and then Chinese reforms really couldn't begin until Deng Xiaoping took up the leadership in the late 70s. And so Mao created a phenomenon not well understood in this country called Maoism. And that's really what I want to talk about. There's an interesting article that is in New Discourses, and it's written by a friend, James Lindsay, a very good analyst of this topic. And Lindsay makes the point in this article, he begins by talking about intersectionality, and that's maybe jumping the gun a little bit, because intersectionality itself comes out of critical race theory. It comes out of the whole diversity movement. But what does it mean? Well, the idea of intersectionality was popularized in the 1980s by a legal scholar named Kimberly Crenshaw. And what Kimberly Crenshaw said was that, look, it's one thing to be a victim of racism if you're, let's say, black. But what if you're a black woman? In that case, you're a victim of racism and sexism. And that's not just 1 + 1, because it's two intersecting types of hardship. So you can see how Kimberly Crenshaw develops this idea. She, in effect, gives an analogy. I suppose it's similar to you're on the highway and you're hit by a car. That's racism coming one way. But let's say you're also hit by a car coming the other way, or from the other direction, and that's sexism. And so Kimberly Crenshaw's point is that that is a completely different experience. It's a double accident, if you will, happening to you. And so her point is that oppression can be multiplied. It isn't just coming in one direction. It can come from 2 or even more directions. And of course, this is the origin of the notion that I'm oppressed because I'm black. I'm even more oppressed because I'm a female, so that makes me a black female. I'm even more oppressed because I got one leg, so I'm a black one-legged female, and on it goes. I'm gay, and so on. So all of these oppressions begin to merge. And the person who claims the top, or maybe I should say the bottom rung of the totem pole, is the person who has the most claims to this intersectional type of oppression. Now, most people, of course, don't know any of this. They don't think like this. They've never heard the term intersectionality. And therefore, says Kimberly Crenshaw, you need to have your mind kind of open to it. And this is the beginning of the phenomenon we call woke. You're woke, or you're awakened to this notion that you are not an individual experiencing life the same as everybody else. You've been dealt a deck of cards the same as the rest of us. No, you are a member of all these groups. You belong to the black ethnic group. You belong to the female gender group. You belong to the gay transgender group, and so on. And so this is a kind of warmed over Marxism. Now, other people have noticed this before. They've noticed that Marxism was really about class. It's about, the rich and the poor, the working class that are the victims, and then the capitalist class, or the bourgeoisie, they are the oppressors. Marx defined the key division in society as being between the workers and their employers, the proletariat on the one hand and the capitalists on the other. What this new philosophy does, this new progressivism, this intersectionality, this critical race theory does, is it takes the class issue and it substitutes a whole bunch of other identities. But in this case, it's not just one divide, it's multiple divides, and that's why it's possible to be oppressed from many different directions. Now, James Lindsay goes on to say that this stuff that Kimberly Crenshaw was talking about in the 1980s is itself derived from the 1960s, when people like Angela Davis, there was apparently something called the Combahee River Collective, a sort of radical group of black feminists, and they got together in the 60s and they wanted to identify their situation as distinct. Again, they didn't want to be just thrown in with the black men. We're all victims of racism. So they sort of came up with this idea that we're black feminists. We're fighting for liberation on two independent fronts. And so you can see here the origin of the idea of intersectionality. So the point is that this goes further back. And then, says James Lindsay, it goes even further back than we think. In other words, we tend to go back to the 60s. We might even go further back to Herbert Marcuse, who was a member of the Frankfurt School. This is a guy who made his reputation really in the 40s and 30s before that, but came to America in the 1960s, taught at places like Berkeley, and taught also, I believe, in San Diego. But, says James Lindsay, the root, the taproot, the original root of all this is in China and is in the Maoist movements that go further back and were driven by Mao Zedong. I believe Mao Zedong came to power in 1949. So by looking at Maoism, you now begin to realize that all of this is, in a sense, American cooked, but the original recipe comes from China. We are dealing with Maoism in America. Mike Lindell has a passion to help you get the best sleep of your life. He didn't stop with just the MyPillow pillow. He created also the Giza Dream bed sheets. We have these all over our home. We love them. The sheets look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep, which is crucial for our overall health. Mike found the world's best cotton called Giza. It's ultra soft and breathable, but also extremely durable. And Mike's latest deal is Sale of the Year. For a limited time, you get 50% off the Giza Dream sheets, marking prices down as low as $29.98 depending on the size. Go to mypillow.com, enter promo code Dinesh. There you'll find not only this great offer, but also deep discounts on all the MyPillow products, the MyPillow robes, the mattress topper, the kitchen towel sets, and so much more. The number to call, 800-876-0227. Once again, it's 800-876-0227, or go to mypillow.com. Make sure to use the promo code DINESH Dinesh.